All right, the next segment we're going to talk about today is connectorizing the cable, prepping it, and actually putting the connector on. If you notice, I'm wearing my nitrile gloves to give myself better gripping capability and to keep myself from touching the braid and the center conductor when I'm doing this. A couple things you should do when you prep the cable is, if it's messenger, like we showed in a previous segment, pull the messenger back correctly and make sure the end of your cable is cut correctly and there's no bends in the cable. You want everything to be straight as possible before you put your tool on and start it. So again, this one has a positive stop, put it to it, slight pinch, give it a twist around till you hear the braid stop cutting, and pull it off. At that point, since I'm wearing gloves, I don't need the brush. I can roll down the braid. And I think at this point, it'd be very important to tell people and show you how does a connector really go on the cable. If you look at the graphic up here, you'll see what the connector is going to do. On the inside of the connector, and I'll separate the back piece from this real quick, you'll see the inner mandrel here, the post, and what that is going to do is it slides over the inner foil and has to go between the braids and the jacket, and it pushes it out. And it slowly expands it. And for a lot of you technicians, you've run into problems in the wintertime when the cable is very cold. It can be stiffer to put a connector on. That's where the gloves come in handy. Or in a lot of situations, the homeowner has painted their house, not removed the cable drop, and you have paint surrounding the jacket. You know, it's a nice bright pink or whatever color they decide to paint it. It makes it difficult for you to put the connector on. So you're probably going to be sitting there scraping it and trying to clean it and get it off. But that's the important thing, is to make sure that you've got the cable prepped properly, and by using the tool, and it's very important that you use the tool with the right prep length on it. Put the connector back together. Now, if you notice, this is the Times Fiber Quick Shield connector. You can take the back piece off, and when you run into an older piece of quad or having a hard time, or sometimes just pushing it on, you'll feel that back piece push off. You haven't damaged anything, it slides back on. But if you are dealing with a quad cable, it's hard to get it on, you might try separating it, sliding that on first. This, I'm using the 77% quick prep, and if you'll notice inside, I know it's hard to see in the camera, but the outer foil is attached to the jacket, and what makes it prep actually like a piece of 60% standard. So you don't have to do anything but roll back the braid. So put it on, put the connector in, and give it a slight push down. You notice it gripped very well. I didn't have to have any sliding. I didn't have to use anything special to grip the cable or the connector. Now it's very important when you put the connector on to look inside. For one, inspect and make sure that nothing's bent, that you don't have any braid wrapped around the center conductor which stops signal. But the main thing you want to do is bottom and make sure on the mating interface that the dielectric is flush with the top of the post. If you don't, then you can change the impedance to the connector, because you've at that point taken away the foam dielectric that our cable uses and made an air dielectric, and it will change your impedance. Another thing I'd like to point out, when we pull the connector back off, is when you look at this and you've prepped it, and again, by using this type of tool and not using a knife, you don't want to nick the center conductor at all. Again, said don't touch it if you can help it at all with it all in your hands, but you don't want to nick it, because the copper cladding is what carries the signal, and if you nick it at all, you've created a place for a reflection. And again, a micro reflection in the digital world will send signals back up and really degrade what's going on with the customer. You may get out of the house today, but one of your buddies will be coming back at another time to fix somebody's telephone service. So don't do it. You know, the big thing is people don't realize that there are more drop connectors in the cable system, drop cable and drop connectors, than any other component. Now, while you may not think that much of it, because they are one of the least expensive items that you will have in the cable system, they cause better than 70% of your problems in your service calls. So it's very important when you prep the cable, when you connectorize it, that you do it properly and don't take any shortcuts, don't make any mistakes, because it will come back to haunt you or one of your fellow technicians at another day. So again, we've got the connector on here. We look at it, it's seated properly, insert the cable and connector into it, making sure that the cable stays down inside the saddle, because you don't want it, if it bends, you could snap it and compress the connector down. Take it out, look at it, make sure you've got a good part. Now, again, as we talked earlier about the prep tools, it's quarter prep with a 5/16 inch center conductor, plus or minus 1/32. Now, every connector manufacturer out there has a different thread length and nut length on their connectors. Technicians tend to, when they look over it and they go, I think that center conductor's too long. And they'll reach over with a pair of pliers and they'll cut it off flush or slightly longer than that. Please avoid doing that. If you use the prep tool properly, positive stop, if not a positive stop, your finger to stop it at the edge, you've created the perfect length. If you cut it off, you've changed the dynamics of the connector. You will either be too short and you won't make good contacts all the way through in your mating devices. So don't do that. Now, a couple other things, I quickly showed you how to prep here a piece of 77% quick prep, which is very easy to do. As we looked at the graphics earlier, you'll find that the different foil and the braid levels that you come into a standard 77% tri-shield or a quad prep are a little different to do. And when you're dealing with a standard 77%, what you have to do, the quick prep takes that outer layer of foil off. In a standard 77%, to put a connector on properly, you have to remove that foil. So what you would do, and it's easy enough to do it, is you don't want to sit there with a knife and cut into it. It's easiest to just reverse the blades or reverse your prep tool, go right to the edge where the foil meets the braid at the bottom, give it a slight turn around and peel that off. When you're dealing with quad cable, again the same procedure. First you have to roll the braid back. And earlier I showed you to use the brush, a toothbrush, something to get it back evenly. You remove the outer braid, it does not get cut off, it gets rolled back evenly, and the more even you make it, that's why a brush works, the easier it is to insert the connector. Take the outer layer of foil off, then the inner layer of braid needs to be rolled back evenly as well. And by doing that, you'll make your insertion force of your connector much easier. Now, people don't realize, and if you look at the graphic again up there of the cutout of connector and how it sits on a piece of cable, the folded back braid, when that connector is compressed, is what gives you the pull strength on the cable. The braid digs into the jacket or folds itself into the jacket, is compressed there, and that's the pull strength. I hope you've learned something here today. Please don't take shortcuts when doing connectors. They're the most important thing in your system today. They're the most numerous and they cause you the most problems. And by taking your time and properly prepping a piece of cable and connectorizing it, you will solve a lot of issues that will surface later on for the customer.